Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order and stand for the pledge, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start tonight with Steffanie, is it Bourque? Bourque is going to give a report on emergency management plan?
Local hazard mitigation plan.
Local hazard mitigation
So
plan.
I've got packets for everyone. You should have 3 items in your packet. And that should be the next one. And then Joe, I brought an extra one so that there's a hard copy here in the office for the public comment period. So, we are pretty much at the finish line for Fairhaven's update of the local hazard mitigation plan. So I'm here on behalf of your local planning team, that consists of Joe and Jim Heller, to present their work to date. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the hard work that Joe and Jim have put into updating this plan. I've basically facilitated a process to make sure that the plan contains all of the federal requirements, but the content that is Fairhaven specific has come from your planning team. So I really want to acknowledge all of their efforts in getting us to this point. So in your packet, I've given you kind of a planning process overview sheet that kind of gives you a snapshot of what, from a very high level, obviously, what the purpose of the plan is and where we are to date, what we're going to be doing between tonight and April 15th, and then what's next in order to get this plan ultimately FEMA approved. Okay? So the April 1st draft of the plan is also in your packet. I would encourage, the plan's being presented, the midpoint plan was presented to you folks by Joe. So we're here to kind of come full circle and provide you with a final full draft, and are presenting it now, obviously, to get input from local officials like yourself, as well as your planning commission, and others in the community. So what you have before you is pretty much like a 99% complete plan, because there are a few placeholders that we'll fill in after we get through the final public comment period, okay, which will run from today through April 15th. So we started this work back in September of 2024, and throughout those months, we've basically come up with a plan that covers what hazard mitigation is, kind of a general purpose for hazard mitigation planning, like what are the benefits of doing this kind of work for a municipality. The plan includes a really high-level community profile with some characteristics about your community that may make it maybe more resilient or vulnerable to the impacts of natural hazards. If you're familiar with your town plan, some of this kind of community profile information might look consistent with your town planning document. We have to, as required by FEMA, kind of document the planning process that your team's gone through in order to develop this update. We also need to talk about what has changed in your community since your last FEMA approved plan, which was back in 2019. So this is a 5-year life, there's a 5-year life cycle for this plan, so it's due for updating now. But in that section, we kind of talk about what's maybe changed in terms of land use or shifts in your mitigation priorities. And then we dive into what I consider kind of the bulk of the plan. There's two major sections. One where the planning team went through a pretty robust exercise to identify hazards and complete a risk assessment to narrow down a broad range of natural hazard impacts that the community feels that it's most vulnerable to. And those are the hazards that you'll develop a mitigation strategy to address. So all of that hazard identification and risk assessment is presented in section 5 of the plan. And for each of the highest risk hazards, which ended up being extreme cold, snow and ice, flash flooding or fluvial erosion or stream bank erosion, invasive species, extreme heat, inundation flooding, and strong wind. So for each of those types of hazard impacts, there is a profile, a vulnerability summary, so that we really well establish kind of the conditions that you're looking to mitigate against. Okay, that's the section of the plan that you reviewed at the midpoint. So that information hasn't changed since the last time you reviewed the plan. What is new is the mitigation strategy presented in section 6. This section really identifies the mitigation goals for the community, what kind of capabilities you have in 4 different categories in order to successfully undertake mitigation work. And then, like we did in terms of assessing a broad range of natural hazards to determine risk, the planning team also evaluated a broad range of potential actions and then created a short list that's presented in an action plan, the action plan is the short list of actions that the planning team felt were reasonable and practical for the town to implement. And in pretty much within the 5-year window of this plan. The plan concludes with a description of how it will be maintained during its life cycle and then updated on its 5-year interval. This document isn't intended to be kind of stuck on a shelf. Once you've finished the update, it's really meant to be looked at annually to help, keep everybody aware and on track of, the actions that you set out to try to complete in order to reduce the risk that the community faces to natural hazards. So that's the bulk of the plan. There's some appendices. The first appendix A will be the certificate of adoption that will discuss when it will be appropriate for the town to actually take action at a regular board meeting to adopt the final plan. Appendix B summarizes your actions from 2019. And I just remembered Fairhaven's 2019 plan was the very first hazard mitigation plan that I did as a relatively new staffer at the Regional Planning Commission. So it was kind of fun to come back, all these years later and help update it. And, the plan looks quite different now than it did in 2019. That was primarily driven by, changes in FEMA guidance that became effective in 2023 or 2024. Because like with most things, your methods and ways of doing things evolve over time, right? As people become more knowledgeable or experienced. So this plan will look quite different from your 2019. And new in this version is Appendix C, which is a pretty beefy appendix that outlines all of the robust engagement that the community undertook to really try to help connect with people throughout the planning process to help inform its contents. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. As I said, we're sharing this final draft now because the planning team has completed their work and they feel that the plan was ready for presentation. It's the opportunity now for you folks who ultimately will be responsible for adopting and then, implementing parts of this plan to review it, make sure that you're comfortable with the contents. And we're hoping that the review can be accomplished over the next 2 weeks. So my goal would be to come back to your next meeting on April 15th to coincide with the closing of the public comment period, to receive any feedback that you folks as board members might have, as well as anything else from the public that might be shared at your meeting. And I would come to you and, apprise you of any comments that are emailed to me during the next 2 weeks. So if we want to kind of look at the cover sheet, we're targeting sometime in April to kind of close out not only the public comment period, but get approval from the board to submit the plan to Vermont Emergency Management for what will be considered kind of a prior approval that's necessary in order for the state to weigh in as to whether or not they think your plan complies with all the federal requirements. And the third piece of the material in your packets is the tool that the state reviewers are going to use to make that determination. So I've pre-filled in, as is required, where in your plan each of these federal requirements is addressed. So we'll submit a final draft of the plan after the public comment period and address any final revisions that may come in during that time. So once the board is comfortable with the final version of the plan, we'll submit it along with the review tool to the state. And once the state issues what's called approval pending adoption, no changes to the plan, right? When you get ready to make this submittal for approval pending adoption, that means you're not touching that plan again unless the state reviewers come back and tell you that there are deficiencies that need to be addressed. And only then, can you make those changes in order to get that approval that's necessary for you to then adopt the plan. And once the plan is adopted, it's resubmitted for FEMA final approval. And it'll be that FEMA final approval date that starts the 5-year window on your plan. Okay. So, any questions?
Board members, do you have any questions for Steffanie about the process?
Probably once I read it all, I will, but not right now.
I'm curious if there's any way to get this document in sort of a plain text version, either a Word document or a text document. You've done a lot of lovely work, obviously, with the visuals in the PDF.
I'm be thrilled about, you could download a PDF version and you could maybe put comments in a PDF version. It's developed in Microsoft Word in 2-column format.
Okay.
So from just a logistical standpoint, I don't know if you work in 2-column format in Word a lot. It's really not designed for that in terms of editing, and I just don't want to create just a formatting nightmare. So I would prefer if you could make comments in PDF.
Yeah, that would be great. But even that format would be lovely. It's for the purposes of ingesting it into an audio tool, in case I wanted to listen back to it, it's easier to do with a Word document than it is with a PDF. Totally okay if that's not accessible, but if it is, I would love to review it in that format if that's at all possible.
Okay, so long as you don't try to change or...
No, that's
okay.
that's
I'd be happy to share it. Can I send it to Joe and have him forward it on
absolutely.
to you? Okay.
Thank you.
Great. And in terms of accessing a digital version, if folks want to do like I suggested in terms of downloading a PDF and, use if you prefer to do your review in a digital format, there's a landing page set up for this project. It's The web address is right at the bottom of this, tinyurl.com/Fairhaven LHMP 25. So I encourage you to check out the landing page. It kind of provides a big picture overview of the plan purpose and the planning process. And as I've already said, we're at the tail end of it now. So there's spots for you to click a link to download the PDF. So you can access it digitally on the landing page, your paper copy here. For members of the public, there will also be a paper copy available here at the town office.
Good. Any other questions from board members?
Not so much a question. Would it be possible just to review, because I saw some of the respondent questions in the survey, the benefits to the town on approving such a plan versus the consequences of the town going without a plan, so that for folks who may be not up to speed on why we're going through this process, it might be helpful for them to know.
Sure. I think on page 1 of the plan where it talks about the purpose, there are some, I think, just intrinsic benefits for community planning that are depicted in the graphic. So making sure that you've got a document that is community driven and it's living, it's something that you guys as a board and administration are looking at on an annual basis to make sure that you're taking necessary steps to do your due diligence in terms of trying to mitigate from the effects of natural hazards. The plan itself would identify kind of cost-effective actions for risk reduction, things that the planning team believes are reasonable and practical. It focuses resources on the greatest risks. That's the whole point of the hazard identification and risk assessment. Promotes partnership building. You'll see in the action plan potential partners for the town to work with to try to complete the various actions. It, in general, increases awareness of hazards and risks, so it kind of provides, it's an educational tool, and it basically aligns risk reduction with public activities and decision making. That's one of the things that will make your mitigation efforts most successful, is if you kind of integrate these concepts into your government, all of the rest of your government operations. But if you're looking for something that's more financially driven, as far as a reason to do this kind of work, that is specifically on page 25 of the plan. So if there is a federally declared disaster, and the community wishes to participate in FEMA's public assistance program, which is designed to provide financial support in the form of 75% of eligible repair costs to communities that have suffered in a federally declared disaster. The state has set up what they call an Emergency Relief Assistance Fund. They refer to it as ERAF. So in addition to public dollars, 75% of public dollars coming from the federal level, there's that 25% wedge where the state's ERAF program will contribute varying amounts depending on what steps a town has taken to try to mitigate for natural hazard impacts. So there's a graphic on page 25 that really kind of lays out nicely in the event of $1 million recovery project. The dollar value in the middle would kind of shows what your municipal responsibility would be if you take certain steps. So if you participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which you do, if you have adopted town road and bridge standards that comply with V-Trans minimums, which you have, if you update your local emergency management plan and keep that current on an annual basis, which you do, and you have a current hazard mitigation plan, you qualify for a 12.5% contribution from the state's ERAF program. If you don't have the hazard mitigation plan, that 12.5 drops down to 7.5. So in $1 million recovery project, you're looking at paying $75,000 or $125,000. So, you know, there is also a financial incentive behind, you know, all the work that goes into preparing this plan and adopting it.
Thank you.
To make it clear, I've also, it's also stated on page 2 that this is just, as the name suggests, it's a plan. It's not a contract, it's not a binding agreement. It's once adopted, it's not legally binding, right? You know, FEMA's not gonna come down and say, oh, you said you were gonna do this by this date, so that makes you, none of that happens, right? This is a planning tool, right? So it outlines the goals and actions that the town would like to take to prevent future loss of life and property from natural hazards. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
So it looks like, just to sum up where we're headed, you'll be coming back to our next meeting, and you'll be looking for, we'll have time to have looked at all of this, any input the board has, or I would take it if someone else had input, you'd be taking that.
Right.
We'd be, as a board, maybe not signing the approval, but saying yes, and you take that to get approved, and then you come back for us.
So,
Just wanted to make sure I knew the
yeah,
process.
so, and I would draw your attention to page 5, which is table 2, kind of outlines all the key date milestones in this process. And you'll notice that April 18th and April 29th are highlighted in yellow as tentative. So it really depends on what kind of feedback we get over the next 2 weeks. If there's really minimal to no input on the plan when I come back on the 15th, we may be in a position for me to ask that you consider approving the document for submittal for APA, the approval pending adoption, on the 15th. If your comments are kind of editorial in nature or like minor typo corrections or things like that, I could see that happening. If we get considerable feedback during the 2-week public comment period that really requires all of that material to go back to Joe and Jim and, you know, have them kind of sort through how to address it, we would be having a planning team meeting on April 18th to do that. And then we'd be circling back with you on the 29th with a revised plan based on the public comment input for us to kind of do this again.
Good, and this is my
Okay.
question, we need to get this approved in April.
That would be my goal, yes. I'd like to be submitting this for approval pending adoption in April. Okay?
If there, Joe, any questions I asked? No. Thank you very much for coming and explaining this to us. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of
2
weeks.
weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, item 3, amendments to the agenda. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
I have one, sir, if it's okay. Approval of liquor and tobacco licenses,
And under new business,
please.
do I have a motion for that?
I make a motion that we amend the minutes to, or the agenda to accommodate the liquor licenses.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from March 18th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes for the March 18th meeting as written.
I'll second that.
Any comments, edits? All those in favor? Aye. And there were a lot of minutes there. Clary did an excellent job.
They look really good.
Okay, item 5, department head reports.
Good evening. The last 2 weeks we had 2 arrests. The Chins aren't really arrests, they're children being supervision. It's up to 3 children, each township PCF. And then one wanted person. He wrote 119 traffic tickets, 35 written warrants. No crashes, which is good, and no parking violations. The 13 sets of civilian fingerprints. I provide you a review of the highlights of what we did, which is last 2 weeks, a lot of foot patrol, a lot of traffic. So we have 340 calls for service with 1,228 for the year.
Good. Questions for the chief?
Yeah, on 322, 761 and a 50. I just want to know what kind of car that was able to go 761 miles an hour in 2020. And where can I get said car?
Fair.
Asking for a friend.
It was 76.
That was a very fast car.
Yeah. That's all. That's all I had to ask.
That's the April Fool's joke for tonight.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. See, look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Shall we do DPW, or you wanna go do a combination of,
We'll do the combo today.
okay?
We'll start with the transfer station. As part of our push to keep our employees and our residents safe, Project Work Safe will be back in May to the transfer station. If you remember, we had them come out last year and just review town hall and DPW, and I think they went to the water plant as well. So they'll be back in May to check out the transfer station, make sure everything's good there. The water leak up at the Jiffy Mart, which I think a few people had noticed, they patched that up today. Fabians did that work, and that work is being paid for by Jiffy Mart. That was an abandoned line on their property. Over on Marhar, Public Works replaced a culvert. I think that was last Friday. They've also been up doing some bank stabilization and some tree removal on Scotch Hill. We're prepping for I'm going to say it out loud, but we're prepping for paving up there at Scotch Hill. I'm feeling good about it this year. I said it on camera, so
It's gotta happen.
it gotta happen. The tree down at Cedar Grove, the guys went out and cleaned that up last week. In the swap shop, I'm meeting with the team tomorrow after our team meeting. We're gonna go take a look at the progress. I have some draft rules that I'll share with the board at the next meeting, and get that opened up at the end of this month, end of April, mid to end of April. We renewed the mutual aid agreement through the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. This is the 5th year we're doing that. This is if there's a FEMA event, we help our neighbors, and then we can be paid for the equipment that we loan them. Town hall paint job, the exterior of town hall, the soffits up top. This is a project we've been trying to get done for 2 years. Flying Colors Painting out of Rutland. He was the only bid on the job. It's Vito. What's the young lady that owns the pizza place? Lucy. It's Lucy's son.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So he's going to do the project. He's going to do it at the end of the summer. He bumped it up, so he'll be here in late April, early May to do that job.
Nice.
Okay, let's talk about the storm that went through. We did have some trees down. Power was out. The big thing for us is that we lost quite a bit of equipment at the wastewater plant. We lost one phase of electricity going to the plant, and when it came back, when the power came back on, it smoked some of our equipment. The electricians were out this morning at 7 o'clock, and they managed to get some of the plant back up and running. They're developing a report and a list of equipment that needs to be replaced. And I've already submitted that claim to the insurance company, so they're expecting about $50,000 worth of damages. But that's right. I mean, I started at 500. I shot a little high.
Yeah, 50 sounded better.
Yeah, that's what the insurance company said. That sounds better. So that's we're moving forward with that. I'll give the board an update as that comes out. But yeah, towards the end of this week, we'll hear about that. And the town hall RFP for the air conditioning and the heat pumps is due back on the 7th. That's also going to do insulation in the attic as well as repair the porch in front of the police department to bring it up to ADA standards. For the select board, important thing for the board to remember is The water sewer budgets are in development right now, and this board will get a first look May 13th. So you got about a month before we start whipping up into more budgets. And that's what I got for you today.
Questions for Joe? Okay, so we did,
Just quick, are we, the sewer plant, is there anything that we as a community, should we like not be, okay?
so we just did 5 and 6 department head reports and town manager together. We're now on old business, reappraisal bids.
Yep, so the reappraisal bids, I need to bump that out one more week. The listers and I both reviewed the proposals, and the listers are currently reaching out to, what do you call that? People that had done work with these people prior.
References?
References, thank you. They're reaching out for references. So once we get a few more references back, we'll be able to speak more intelligently to the board about these.
Okay. Moving on to B, old business, appoint Linda Sienkiewicz to the planning commission.
Yep, so I missed Linda Sienkiewicz at the last meeting. Then her term is up, so the board needs to appoint her.
I make a motion to appoint Linda Sienkiewicz to Planning Commission.
Second.
And we have a second. Know what we're doing? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, we need a term.
Oh, sorry.
If there was
Indefinitely.
If you're talking, you want that whole thing read that was there.
So make a motion to appoint Linda Sienkiewicz to the planning commission for a 3-year term that ends March 2028.
I'll second that.
Now do we know what we're doing? All those in favor?
Aye.
If not, I'd have to come back and ask again.
New business, appropriation policy.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, it was requested that the board review the policy. I have put that in the packet for you.
Did board members get a chance to look through that? And if so, any comments on our existing appropriation policy? I think it's titled Social Service Appropriation Policy, Town of Fairhaven.
I read it twice.
Okay, you have something, Chad, you want to?
Page 2, I just want to draw attention to paragraph 2, where it says, those social service agencies that have had an appropriation request approved at the most recent annual town meeting are not required to submit a petition for an article requesting an appropriation if the amount requested is the same or less than the amount approved by the voters in the previous year. I believe, if I'm recalling, this is before my time on the board, this was enacted in the COVID era when getting petitions signed was somewhat difficult. I think we've heard a lot of input from some residents around wanting to see petitions circulate again, so that we had a more active presence with the entities that we were appropriating to. So I would look to see if the board would consider removing such language and reverting back to our policy of previous years where petition was required for any appropriation request.
Right, and that's even on the front page, the petition. Yeah.
Any other comments about the policy? Can I make a couple comments about the policy?
Yeah.
On page 2, that same paragraph, just go down another sentence, when it talks about each year, the people with appropriations have to put a letter in requesting to be put back on the ballot. They also need, and in that, they need to take and supply us with a document for our annual report saying you got X amount of money, this is where that money went and how it was used. Also, further down in the policy, at the end of the second paragraph, agencies that do not submit an approved letter and report to the select board by the deadline must then submit a voter-backed petition. In other words, understand, just because you were there and you were approved in your amount in the existing policy, the amount didn't go up and it didn't go down, you still have to put a letter in this policy to be on the appropriation, and you still have to provide the explanation for our annual report of this is where the money went. I just don't want it, if it sounds, it's not a everyone come in free type of thing. There's rules. And if that's not supplied, then the appropriation, you will be required to get signatures to get it on the ballot.
Also, I'd like to see too them actually come to the pre-town meeting and so they can answer questions, because a lot of people had questions for these committees or these organizations and they weren't there to answer them. So yeah, it's easy to ask for money, but if you're not there to explain why,
You're right, spot on.
right? You can't even show up to. You're asking for money. You can't even show up to explain why.
In this policy that we have that's been approved, in the last paragraph, it describes just that. The expectation is the social service requesting the appropriations under the policy. They need to, a representative, and it says a representative should attend town meeting and/or the public informational hearing to explain the appropriation request to the voters and answer questions. I just wanna, I think you noticed that I was one of the people who signed when we did the change on this, so I just wanted to give you a little background. The board at the time when we put this change in the appropriation request in, spent a lot of time talking about should it be should or will be there, like we'll send somebody.
Right.
Still a question of when you're changing different things, what you want to do. I can tell you the discussion at the time was around if we have someone who's asking for less than $1,000 of, and they're in multiple places and sending people out. After kicking around a lot, we ended up with should. So I mean, but it's a pleasure of this board to decide as you're changing what you'd like to do.
Me personally, I think because we sit here and a lot of people, wanting change. I think that should change to must or whatever, however you want to work. But I think that should be a requirement. Me personally, that you be there. You're like I said, you're asking for taxpayer dollars. The least you can do is show up to the pre-town meeting
And also, I would like to see exactly what people in the town of Fairhaven benefit from it. Exactly where that goes.
And that's the expectation in the annual report.
Sometimes we don't get that, and it seems like it's a giveaway program.
Is it?
As for any requirement to show up to town meeting, I'd be hesitant around making it a must language. The reason being, we think about some organizations, maybe like Slate Valley Cares, for example, where they've got an executive director. They might have short staff. Who do they send to which town on which town meeting day? Because there's probably a few different appropriations across different towns, and at that point they'd be forced to pick and choose.
And at the past town meeting, remember how we had like ARC and we had the chief help us out by saying, hey, this, we use it a lot, it's here, but they're probably on every town's, I don't think they have enough people to physically.
right. My only concern to that is, you do have a lot of voters that come out and they want some questions answered, and
let me,
they're not there to answer them, so I don't know.
let me ask you this other question came to mind when I looked, because when I read through this, I said, here are the rules. If you just followed the rules, I don't understand why there's a problem. When you make the statement that you're hearing a lot of people, I've heard one or two vocal and Facebook people talk about appropriations. We have appropriations on our agenda, and we have 3 people. And once we get done talking here, I'm gonna ask if there's anything from them. But I'm just wanna caution us that we need and jump thinking we have the masses. Usually when we make a decision that's not very popular or people want something done, it's standing room only in here. So I'm just want to point that out. Now, I don't want to sound defensive towards a policy. We'll do whatever the board wishes. But
No, I just, that one art program there that Chief Bill Humphreys give us a good rundown on what happens and why. That's a selling point, and that was good to hear. And I think we should hear more of that.
Joe,
Just to add a little bit, so the board can make rules around this, if you're not requiring a petition, right? You can say, well, you can go on, if you do this, you don't have to get the petition. But anybody can get on with any petition, and it doesn't matter what the board says,
and they don't have
right?
to
So
give us.
Joe's fundraiser could go out and say, I'm gonna get my signatures, and anything, this policy wouldn't have any weight to that. So the real lever you have to pull is that ability to not get signatures and force people to come to the meeting or force them to give us the reports they want because they don't want to get signatures.
They don't have to.
Yeah. Was that clear?
While you're talking, Joe, because you usually are I want to know, you're the person who we rely on to administer the letter request comes in. If the request letter and the explanation of what they did with the money needs clarification, you give the pushback, any concerns or anything
It's
there?
the first year was tough because it was a new thing for our agencies. But after that, we start early, Eileen and I, and we call them and we email them. And they usually get us the information we're asking for. And they know what we're asking. If you look in your town report, you'll see that our agencies are telling us, yes, we serve these Fairhaven residents, instead of the broader information we used to get where they say they serve 10,000 meals. Now they're saying we serve 10 households in Fairhaven. It's a little bit more granular. So we did see good movement on that front.
And the other, and because it's not that I'm not listening to, but we had someone in here very, very adamant about changing it. Did a little research and said, okay, and it was primarily, most of the emotion I felt came from Rutland Regional and the fact that we already have an ambulance, and I won't rehash that, but I'm going, after checking, during COVID, Rutland Regional never had a petition filled out. They only sent a letter during COVID after we didn't require. So I'm open-minded enough to say, wait a minute, I don't know if everyone really came in on that. They didn't have a chance. If we also have the ability of going out and saying, for those that never had an appropriations request with signatures filled out, you need to do it at least once. My concern is, whether I agree with them or not myself, if the taxpayers keep saying, I want the same thing, and that's what we said, year over year over year, just because I don't like it there, I don't want to put another obstacle. The taxpayers have a perfect ability on March of saying no as well as yes. So I just want to make sure we're fixing a problem that's.
I think too, it comes down to I think a lot of voters don't realize that these are separate from our budget. I think that's kind of, in my mind, what's kind of brought this up, right? Like that people are voting yes and not really knowing that these are separate entities. So I think that might be more the real issue than trying to change. So, but I don't know how you would go about fixing that. So do you require these agencies to, put stuff in, submit stuff for the town report and like what the funds went through and why they're asking for them again? Like, do we go that route versus changing this policy?
I just didn't know if everyone was aware, because I don't, when our discussion 2 weeks ago, I don't know if everyone was aware that, hey, when it got changed, and it was quite a bit of discussion before it changed the way it did, most of the discussion was around, folks, these items, with the exception of the one I just mentioned that came in during COVID and never got signatures, all the rest of them, for the last 15, 20 years, they've been on and approved. So I'm going, okay.
I think Mike's right. I think a lot of the voters don't realize this. And the bottom line is, every time we spend money, it costs the taxpayers money.
It's your tax.
And if they don't realize, and I don't know how to get that word out there that good,
I think it might have been year 2 when I was here, we tried to do, or we at least did once, the voter guide.
I remember that.
We did.
Remember, there was a little pushback.
There
but
was so much pushback on that.
I
because
don't-
Everybody said, now they're telling us how to vote.
Yeah, that wasn't the case at all.
Rutland,
but I
Rutland
thought-
did something like that. Like they did like a voting card thing, or I guess it's like historical. Like they used to like give you like a little card to go into like the polls with or whatever on like what to vote on. I guess I don't.
I'm just trying to get
Right.
information out. It's hard to get through the white noise.
You can put the information out there. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, Basically, that's what it is. I mean,
Right, like I said, I think that's one of the
best
bigger
thing we
problems.
can
How do we get people to realize like they don't? That's not these aren't life or death for the town, for as far as we're concerned.
Well,
No,
and I think some they just think they may think that it's already in there. It's part of
just
the
raise the
budget, and
taxes.
yes, I'm
Right.
for. I don't know. I can't speak for folks, but on this policy, because I'm not ready to. I mean, I've heard some pretty good input on some things you'd like to tweak. Not saying it does, and do we take in? I'm trying to get an idea so Joe will know what we want to tweak for to come back again and say, what do you want to change in this?
So I think like to Chad's point, I think going back to before COVID, I think eliminating potentially that and going back to what it was before COVID.
Because just so you understand, I feel like
I mean, we
bit of a.
have to get a petition to run for select board seat. I mean, 1 year, so you got to go do it yearly anyways. It's not that hard to get 20 signatures. You got to put a little effort in if you want it, and I don't think that's asking too much from these people. I mean, Slate Valley Care, they can put the petition there front office and they'll get probably 20 signatures in a day.
So, thinking about a direction for Joe to go in, who is in favor on this board of returning to petitions needing to be filled out prior to being listed on the appropriations list?
Yeah.
I'm in favor of that.
Yes.
I am too.
Yes.
It doesn't seem
I
to
think
matter.
that would
Yes.
help a lot. I really
Yes.
do.
I'm a no, but that's good. So it still doesn't. So can you draft changing that language back to the original language?
And then,
Question when we
Take a look.
change it, because with everyone needing an appropriations request and a new policy, just want to make sure the voters also voted, because they always approved the rescue squad, they don't have to fill out an appropriation. Do we, and then the voters said, I don't think we can go against the voters on that, so they still don't, I don't know if that's don't have to fill out an appropriation for eternity, by the way, because that was my question. I'm saying, do we, I want to make sure it's a level playing field
If I
for
understand,
every,
If I understand correctly, there was a vote at one point in time determining that the rescue squad should never have to petition or even be voted on again. Is that what I'm understanding?
It has to be voted on, whatever appropriation they put forward, but they don't have to petition.
Go out,
They
you
just
don't
got a
don't have to go out and
lifetime
get
exemption.
signatures. But I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of what's if we go change
I
that
think this
and
kind of
make
goes
it.
back to the whole, charging for the park thing. If you do it for one, you gotta do it for everyone. As much as, it might cause some rift, I mean, like I said.
That was an issue that was voted on.
Right.
So that goes outside of what.
How long ago was that
I think,
voted on?
yeah, I think it was voted on when there were 20 or 40,000 versus 185,000. Understand, that's a big change, but I mean, it's still, I'm not sitting here, I'm just saying, I wanna make sure that we are being fair.
I can ask VLCT if that's a in perpetuity thing or.
I was just gonna say, just because you
That's
do
quick,
it,
easy.
and what, does that mean for the rest of
Right. 'Cause, like, if
eternity?
we're talking about, this was
Well,
voted
I
on
mean,
in the
I'm just
80s.
going-
I mean, how many
I-
people,
I-
would remember that? I mean, up until now, I didn't know that.
It's, well, but,
Think about how much time. Right. So why don't you reach out to VLCT and ask about that?
so we have that change that it'll bring back. Also, I heard some other things like I think the wording is pretty good for, you tell us what you're doing with the money we're giving you in the middle, but the requirement, the point you made, Mike, about, that you will have some kind of, we kicked that around a little bit and I'm going, I understand now how we got back to should. We'd like to invite them, would love to have them, but
Or at the very minimum, submit some kind of little blurb for Seal or Joe or somebody to read off, and then maybe have them write down some generalized answers to some. And I don't know how you do that, but like.
So they, in the third paragraph on page 2, they have to submit a description of their programs into that inclusion.
they put that in
Town
what they're
report.
doing. The whole point was the annual report would have that information, and people could go there and they go, yeah, like, I think we had a question about Boys and Girls Club, and at the last town meeting, would have been great to have someone from the Boys and Girls Club to answer that question. In the future we'll try, but sometimes it just can't happen. We get it, but now, to say we'd like to see that, I think we want to continue, but I just didn't know if you felt strongly enough that you wanted that to be more, you will have someone, or not.
You can't really you can't really say shall at the point when you get, if you're forcing them to get signatures, they're not required to
They're
do
not
anything that
required
the
to do,
board says.
I was just
after.
gonna say, they don't even have to build a
Like the
report.
law says they get their signatures, they go on the ballot.
Oh.
That's period,
That's-
done story.
Then,
They could come in here and tell you where,
exactly.
where the bear goes,
Mhm.
and it doesn't matter at that point, yeah.
If we require them to get the petition
If
signed,
you require
we
them.
don't get any report from them that demonstrates the impact of their work on
You
the.
can't force them.
Okay.
Most people do.
Most organizations are good when you call them back and say, hey, look, can you put a little more in your report that says, so our taxpayers just wanna know where their dollars are going. And that's a reasonable request.
Well, I think it's important that the voters know what they're voting for and where that money's going.
So also like, and to kind of inform more, so like in the town report, could you do when they do the section like the appropriations, like these aren't, like you do not have to vote yes or no on these, like this is up to you, the voter of.
That was the voter guide that we put out that we got. in
Right, but if
trouble.
you're doing the town report though, I don't know.
We even put on the voter guide, that this will increase your taxes next to, and that got us,
For some
this
reason,
was
people
the
didn't
same,
like
this will
that.
increase, this one went down.
Who composed the voter guide? Was it a group effort on the part of the board, or was it Joe, or?
No,
I wrote it and then passed it.
and then done with the board, blessed it.
I thought it was great, but I wasn't on the board back then, but I know a lot of people that were angry about it.
Yeah,
I mean, see, and I would
Thought we were
see,
concerned.
right? Why would you be angry? Like, I'd want to be informed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've learned in the last year of what is voted on. I could say I voted blindly before, not knowing, but there really isn't a lot of information put out around what you're voting on, you know, I mean, besides the town report, I mean, you'd think the more information you had, the more informed you would be, the better off you'd be. I wouldn't be mad, I'd be happy knowing.
So, not wanting to beat a dead horse, I think we're there, Joe, with the consensus is go write that, change that up and put it back on our next one for.
Well, I just want to clarify one thing. So, sorry, because I think I understand correctly, but if we leave it alone, they are required, everyone who is on the appropriations, they are required to complete a report to send to the town that explains the impact of how they use the money. That to me seems more onerous than having to have a petition signed. And if the intent is to make these organizations demonstrate and put some amount of effort and work into getting the money, I would rather them complete a report than have a petition signed. Like that to me it seems more meaningful and perhaps even more work on their part.
Well, I think they owe it to the voter to have that.
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
I think yes, and right. I think it's important for them to be able to demonstrate to the voters on how their money went and how the town had benefited from it. But at the same time, I'm not looking to put more work on these agencies. I think the petition itself, to me, is designed to inform the voters, hey, we want to be on the ballot, and here are the reasons why. And so I see a petition as being more a potential for more informative to the taxpayers versus writing a report after the fact.
But it's only 15 signatures?
I don't know what the percentage is.
I don't know how many.
Why I got it in my head.
The statute says something like 5%
Okay.
of the voters, so you come up with a number based on it.
Okay, so that's more than
But-
I thought. I'm sorry. I was incorrect.
And it would be, but again, I'm gonna try to wrap that around that. No, I bet things, we'll take a pass, talk about it. Again, put it back on the agenda. One thing you wanna be thinking about, because most people before COVID, when they were getting their signatures, they relied on knowing they needed signatures, so March, when everyone was going to vote, because trying to go and find a registered voter to sign a petition is not an easy task. It's what makes it easy. If we were to change this, I would ask you to just put in the back of your mind to try to consider not going into effect this March. You gotta give them a chance to be tell them effective the following March so that they can be there getting their signatures from registered voters for their petition to be on the following. Yeah, I don't think we don't have a November election. For people, I mean, when, the problem isn't even in the small number, if you've got a group of people that's coming to you, but asking an organization to come out and come into Fairhaven and start knocking on doors for signatures when you have to be a registered voter on that appropriations request, what worked for them and why it worked before we changed the rules in COVID. I feel like we owe it to change the rules to become effective after the next March election, so at least because usually that's where I saw most of the people with their petitions. Okay, I think some folks would be there they'd help out 3 different organizations, and get signatures for each of the organization at one time when they were doing it.
Can I make a request of you, Joe? Not to put more on your plate, but perhaps inviting some of these organizations to the next meeting so we can hear on the impact one way or another.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would,
No, it's not an excellent idea.
yeah,
I'll
we don't want,
invite everybody.
Yeah.
And those who come.
Yeah.
And there's always a
okay. Moving on to the next item under new business is tree pruning in the park. I believe you had some stuff in your boxes on this one here.
Yep.
I did get the picture in there. So that's you'll have a picture. That's the tree that we've been watching for the last 7-8 years. It lost a big leader off the center. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But So we're getting back to our tree pruning program. This year trees came out and they reviewed, they looked at all the trees, including the one with the big rot in the middle of it. And they are recommending, as soon as I find my numbers, they're recommending $10,500 worth of trimming and shoring up and just general maintenance on the park trees. We're asking for that money to come out of the tree fund, which there's currently $12,050 in that fund.
Are you looking for a motion, or because it's already in your tree fund budget, just consensus from the board to go do it?
Nope, this is a reserve fund, so the board has.
Oh, it is from reserve, okay.
But before anybody makes a decision, what I would like to do though is have trees take a better look at that maple instead of just going and cutting it down. They said they can kind of scrape into it to see if it does need to be cut down or not. Cause that's $2,100 worth of tree to remove. And I'd like to make sure that it's really dead before cause it's a big old tree. I really don't wanna cut it down if it's got
Right,
more
and
years.
my only, I think, my only question, if we do, I'd like to see it replaced with another maple.
It should be, yeah.
I mean, we have a really beautiful park, you don't wanna start clear cutting the park, you know, if we take one out, I think we should make it a point to
I think
replace it.
that's been the policy in the past anyways, to replace trees.
I've replaced only one since I've been here, but yeah, that's the goal is to replace
And
that.
I think maybe we ought to try to put 3 or 4 in there this year. If we can.
Like I said, I'll get some numbers for you from the Portland Conservation District for trees.
Good. So, yeah, with that said, if the board was so inclined, we would like to trim up those trees and then look at that one and take it down or not, depending on what the specialist says.
Okay.
Well, what if I make a motion that we, trim all these trees accordingly? And with the exception of the big maple, we do some more research on it and have them investigate it closer to see if it does have to come down. If it doesn't, we might be able to get a little more life out of it.
What's the total amount?
10-5.
So up to, but not to exceed.
Not to exceed 10,500
That's correct.
is the motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Come out of the park tree fund.
The motion is to take, not to exceed $10,500 of the Park Tree Restoration Reserve Fund.
Correct.
Motion was made by Rich, seconded by Sam. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
And that's to do the trimming for 10,500 and cut this tree down if
If
necessary.
necessary.
If necessary.
I will come back to the board before I make that call. I won't cut that tree down before I come back to you guys. I'm very cognizant of these trees.
Thank you,
Yeah, but they're
because I'm
important.
gonna make some noise if it comes down and not replaced.
No, I got you there.
Okay, new business appointment, to the Otter Creek Communication District.
Make a motion to appoint Sam Lucci as the Fairhaven representative to the Otter Creek Communications District.
I'll second that.
Good. Discussion? Sam, we want to thank you for doing, for volunteering for that,
Thank you.
to be on the cut. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
I was hoping you were gonna say nay.
Maybe next year.
Oh, that's,
Yeah,
that's not, yep. Good. And now we have approval of liquor tobacco licenses, D, that we added to the agenda.
There were a few submitted, 3 in total. Make a motion to approve a first-class club license, a third-class club license, and an outside consumption permit to Fairhaven Eagles, area number 3907.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve a first-class restaurant/bar license and an outside consumption permit for Scotch Hill Brewing LLC.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Rich. Questions? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve a second-class liquor license and a tobacco license to SW Walk Corporation, BDA, Liberty Street Market.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done? And do we have documents to sign or?
Nope, it's just
Cool.
motions anymore.
Okay, now we are at 2 minutes for public comment. Lorraine?
The IBC has been in operation for 5 years. We ask for very little money for you. We kind of do everything ourselves, and we have very few volunteers. So I gave you a list of our inventory, and was told that we would find some place. The only person that's talking about it is Reese, and he doesn't have any room in his storage facility. At the EBC meeting, we sort of decided that we aren't going to do the Christmas event anymore. The EBC is going to take it over. So that will come out of our inventory. So it's taking up one bay of my garage. And Jay and I are going to clean up the downsides. So we can't keep it anymore. So if you don't want to get us a place for storage, then after each event, we'll just bring this stuff up here and we'll be done with it. You don't have to give us me an answer now, but we can't do it anymore.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna give this, because maybe a couple of you didn't have the inventory list.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Johnny?
First off, my name is Jonathan Bilowitz. I would like to congratulate everybody on their appointments to the select board. I'd like to welcome the new member. I just got your name, Sam Lucci.
That's right, yeah.
Nice to meet you. Welcome to the board. As you know, I'm suing the town of Fairhaven, the police department, and the associated people. Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you on your appointment to the big boy chair. I hope you're ready to make a big boy decision tonight, because I'm going to shoot you a big boy decision. I am willing to settle that lawsuit completely and totally before we even have to go to mediation, because I have a mediation schedule and all I have to do is sign it and we go to mediation. And the next step after that is actually going to litigation. But I'm going to shoot you guys a decision, a choice you guys have to make. Would you like to settle? All you have to do is show me the 4 checks the town used to purchase my property during the 3/18/14 tax sale. Because your attorney told the Vermont Supreme Court that you guys were the highest winning bidder. Mr. Durkee said under oath in this very room that the town did not formally bid. Mr. Gunter and everybody else has only submitted 1 check for 17/14, 29 days after the tax sale. That check and purchase is null and void because it is not at a public tax sale. You know, because Mr. Chairman, you've been on the board for 8 years. You were served the original lawsuit by Sheriff Deputy at the time, Sherry McDermott. Those checks don't exist.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Lillian?
Good evening, Lillian Belowitz, Town of Fairhaven. Again, congratulations to everyone and welcome, Mr. Lutic. What I'd like to address tonight is concerning the financial reports and checkbook. Going back, what's on the agenda as number 12. Going back to town meeting day, I believe it was Mr. Stannard, the elected auditor, raised the issue, well, he raised several issues, but one of them in particular was the paid auditor, the independent auditor's report. He stated that it wasn't shining, or similar language, and said that it should more or less be available to the public online, posted. I followed up with that, and if you go to, just as an aside to validate what I'm saying, If you go to the town clerk elections, March 4th, the audio, it's between the time frame of 40 minutes and 47 minutes, give or take in there. I addressed Seal Hunt as the moderator, as I'm addressing you, Mr. Travers, as the chairperson, to question whether or not that is available and why it hadn't been posted. Because I had requested of the board back in October, November, 4 months prior. And the conversation went back and forth with Seal and the board, and I believe you, Mr. Travers, said something about, it was difficult to hear, but well, I don't know if it's posted or not. Mr. Gunter said, yes, it's available. And I questioned, well, could it be? And I said, well, yes, it could be posted, but would it be able to be posted? Mr. Gunter says somewhere in there, 45, 46, 47 minutes, it could be posted, it can be posted. Okay, and Seal then said, okay, so we posted on the website. Here we are 4 weeks later, and it is still not posted. And Mr. Lucci, I'm sorry, Mr. Travers, if you could address with Mr. Lucci whether or not he's had the opportunity to avail himself of that independent auditor's report to bring him up to speed at no fault of his own. That there is reason, I mean, yes, all the good news gets on Facebook, town page. Again, we request, by and through myself, the elected auditor, why isn't that report online? Is there an answer?
If you're talking about the
The
fiscal year 2024 audit,
Right, the one that was just brought out.
we are looking forward to when that is given to us.
You have it. It was given in October, November. I have it.
If you're talking the fiscal year 23 audit,
The one that was
that
given
one,
out-
that one has been given to us, but I'm just trying to tell you, the most recent audit it'll be on an agenda, and the auditor will actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, will be actually online or here to talk about the most recent.
The one I'm talking about and the one that the elected, and pardon me if I go over the 2 minutes because we're engaging peacefully.
But it's
The question I have is
That's
one that
definitely 2
Mr.
minutes.
Stanley.
okay. We've exceeded our 2 minutes
Still
here.
isn't online.
Thank you for your comment.
You are quite welcome.
Rose?
Roseanne Van Loo, Fairhaven. Regarding the appropriation policy, I believe that if Mike made a good point, and that a lot of people just go down and vote because they think it's part of the budget. I think that if we were to have people, the organizations have petitions, I think that makes a little bit more of a statement that this is not part of the budget that is already put together. This is a separate from the town if they have to sign petition to get it on there. That's all. And when I had to put the petition together a couple years ago, I think it was 99 signatures. So if you were.
Thank you for your comment. Moving on to parking lot. Anything that anyone, all those items are being pretty much are in the cooker. They're still being worked on, in other words here, unless there's any questions from board. Board roundtable.
Nothing on my end. I'm
Sam?
curious to hear what everyone else has going on.
I know it was brought up, town properties that we had available. I think you were working on a list we talked about, made progress on that at all, Joe?
I can say that we do have one piece of property for sale right now. It's the old outlet spot on Prospect. We have sold most of the properties that we could. I know there's 4 potential for building lots on Academy where that park is, but there's not a lot of there's not a lot of public will to sell those. We do have, the town owns 2 lots on Union Street and 1 lot on Willard that are coming up this summer.
Do you find when you list them, there's a lot of action on, or are they kind of stagnant? Like,
The one, and I'll bring the whole list, I'll bring everything at the next meeting, but the one at Prospect has been stagnant. There's really no movement on that because it's kind of a bad spot. But the rest of the properties, a lot of interest. I know the Union Street properties, where they're ready to go, there are people ready to go.
Anything else, Mel?
nope, that's it.
Rich?
I don't really have anything tonight.
Chad?
I'm good.
I'm good. This is pretty good. Roundtable is good. Reviewing the financial reports. Chad, want to take us through that?
Let's walk through this.
Wait.
All right.
You got it.
I'll make a motion to approve the payroll warrant for $35,032.03.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve the general warrant of $39,999.33.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Rich. That, even though you may think 39,000 is a little low, we just didn't have a big bill going out there for anyone who knows. All those in favor?
Aye.
Checkbook status?
And our checkbook is sitting at $932,967.50.
Good, thank you. Executive session. Can someone make a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for contract negotiations under 1 VSA 313A1.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.